In today's American English pronunciation lesson, we're talking about phase 0 of the American English mouth posture. And this is probably going to be the single most important lesson that you watch out of all the mouth posture lessons. Hi, I'm Josh, your American English guide, and this is English Hacks Pronunciation, where I help you to sound more like a native if you want, and to understand real natural speech better. I've developed a step-by-step approach that will allow you to build up the posture of American English. This is phase 0, but each phase will build on previous phases and constantly reinforce old elements while incorporating new elements. This is important because there are a lot of moving parts: the jaw, the lips, the tongue, the throat, the breath. So we want to go step by step and build things one at a time. Now, a quick but important note before we get started. This is not traditional education. Knowledge is not skill. Some of these exercises might seem kind of boring. They might seem too simple or easy for you, but remember that that's very often a trap. And you cannot simply just follow along with the lesson and do some of the exercises and say, okay, I did it in the lesson. No, you have to practice this because we're trying to build a new mouth posture, the way that you hold your mouth and your vocal tract in general. And this requires repetition. It requires building up muscle memory and feeling things so that you can improve your accent. We have 3 things in phase 0. The first thing is language awareness training. This is something ongoing, meaning that it doesn't matter if you're doing this course or you finish this course. You will continue to try to notice things about your native language and American English. There are some specific exercises for this, so let's talk about that first really quick. Always try to become more consciously aware of how your mouth and your vocal tract are moving, the tension, everything. If you can, try to become aware of the posture of your native language, but that's not required. You just need to become more consciously aware of how your tongue feels, how your jaw feels, how your throat feels, how your lips feel, and how your breath is flowing. And you want to pay special attention to your native language as we go through these steps so that you can compare, for example, with the jaw. How open is your jaw compared to what I'm saying? In your language, it's probably more closed, but it might not be. It depends on your language. You're going to have to explore these things and then compare them and adjust as we go. In addition, one really powerful exercise that you can do for native language awareness is to listen to non-native speakers of your language who are native speakers of American English and listen to how they sound. You will probably notice certain interesting and important things because most likely they're using American English mouth posture while speaking your language. This can be used as a comparison, and you'll start to understand why Americans sound that way in your language, and it will help you figure out how to reverse engineer that because you can actually mimic how they sound if they have a thick American accent. And of course, make sure that as you learn more about the mouth posture of American English, that you're trying to observe with your eyes and especially your ears what native speakers of American English are doing. The second thing in phase 0 that we're going to talk about today is ear training. Now, if you've already done ear training or you can hear the difference between sounds and all that, you don't have to worry about this part. But just for completeness, if there are sounds that you can't hear the difference between, like E and I or E and A, for example, you want to go and use minimal pairs to train your ears. I have lots of minimal pair lessons on this channel. Additionally, you want to train your ears for linking, how things change or move between words, as well as inside of words. And you also want to train your ears for hearing the proper stress and rhythm of the language. And I have other lessons about those topics as well. Now, the third and final thing in phase 0 that we're going to talk about today is the biggest and most important thing, not only for today's lesson, but for the entire mouth posture course. This is tongue training. This will also involve a little bit of basics with the throat. The first thing we're going to talk about here is what I like to call the dead tongue or the dead sound, or you can even call it the zombie sound because you're going to try to sound kind of like a zombie. And don't worry, this is useful. Trust the process. The first exercise that we're going to do for this is we're going to try to completely relax the tongue. Now, in your native language, based on your mouth posture, the way you hold your tongue will feel relaxed to you, but it's not 100% relaxed. It's the same for me in American English. It's not 100% relaxed. We want to try to get as close to that as possible in order to reset and help break out of your native language mouth posture. This is not going to happen immediately overnight, but don't worry, as you go through the exercises in today's lesson, you'll start building better awareness and control over your tongue, and you'll be able to get the proper result. So let's start by focusing on the tongue and the 3 parts of the tongue. So we have the front of the tongue, the middle of the tongue, and the back of the tongue. And when I talk about the back of the tongue, it's important to note that there's the part of the tongue that attaches in the throat. That's part of the back of the tongue. And when I say back of the tongue, I'm including all of this up to here. So this would be the middle, and then this would be the back. So it's not just in the throat, it's also this part here. So go ahead and close your eyes. Make sure that your mouth is not completely closed. Just let your lips be open. Relax the jaw, it doesn't matter. Focus on the front part of your tongue. Try to relax it. And if you notice any tension, let that tension go. On the tip of the tongue, on the top of the front part of the tongue, on the sides of the front part of the tongue. Just relax. Let it sink down. Okay, go to the middle of the tongue. Relax. Relax the top, relax the sides. Just let it kind of fall. Let it all come off. No tension. Then go to the back. And this is very important. You're going to try to relax the back. Don't push it. Just any little tension you feel, try to remove it. Just let it release. The top of the back, the part that goes into the throat. So let it kind of sit down, sink down. Now there's one little detail here, which is that you do not want the back of the tongue to fall into the throat because you'll get aw. So you want to keep the airway open, but just remove all the other tension, okay, from the tongue. Now keeping your eyes closed and keeping your tongue relaxed, focus on your throat. There's the top of your throat on the inside. If you feel any tension there, let it go. Relax, relax. No tension. Go to the middle of your throat. Relax. Go to the bottom of your throat. Relax. Let it all go. Back up to the tongue. Go through the tongue, through the throat. Everything is nice and open, nice and relaxed. And remember, we're not trying to push anything open. We're just relaxing. We're removing a lot of tension. Now, keeping everything just like that, nice and relaxed, nice and open, you're going to take a big breath. And after you do that, you might add a little extra tension. So take a quick second, make sure everything is still nice and relaxed. And then I want you to just breathe out. Don't add tension, just let that breath go. So again. Now you should notice that there's not really any tension in the throat or in the tongue. A tiny, tiny, tiny little bit is okay. Now let's do that again. Keep your eyes closed. Keep everything relaxed. But now when you take your big breath, when you let go, you're going to add voice. And I'll give you an example here of what this should sound like. You can open your eyes for a second if you want. So close your eyes. Make sure everything's relaxed. Take your breath. Double check that it's relaxed. Breathe out and add voice. The exact sound doesn't matter. That's okay. Just make sure that the air is flowing. Now you'll probably notice, if you pay close attention, that when you were just using breath, there was very little, if any, tension in your throat and your tongue. But as soon as you add voice, you start getting a little bit more tension. That is all the tension that you want for American English in general. Okay, so if your language has the throat sort of tightened up a little bit, or if the back of the tongue has some extra tension, maybe it's pushed forward, which we're going to talk about, then that is adding extra tension on top of this basic voice tension, and we want to remove that. Now don't worry, as I said, this will not happen immediately overnight. You probably can't feel all these things yet. You got to practice and play with these things, and you'll start to become more aware of what's going on, and then you'll be able to adjust. And as I said, make sure that when you let that voice out, that you're not doing something like that. It means you're blocking your airway. Don't let that happen. Okay, keep that airway open. Don't push it. Just make sure it's nice and open. So this is the dead sound that you're trying to get. Now there are some traps you might run into, so you know what to avoid. The first thing that will commonly happen is you'll end up blocking the throat a little because you let that tongue kind of block the airway, or something like that. If your throat is too tight, don't want that either. Okay. Another common trap is that especially if your language pushes the tongue forward a little bit for your posture, you're probably going to have a little extra tension in here that you don't feel. And this can push your tongue sort of up or get a little extra tension, which will then allow the middle to relax because you're trying to relax everything. And you actually get a tiny little bit of the shape of the schwa, center of gravity. And although that is part of our target right now, we don't want that. We're not there yet. Okay, so you want to make sure that you don't hear or so be careful with that. Now there is a recording linked in the description that you can listen to for the dead sound, and you can repeat and play with it and try to get as close to that sound as you can. I do recommend that you try to get feedback from somebody, have them listen to the sound that I'm making, and then make the sound, and they can probably tell you how close you are in case you can't quite hear it. Now, I'm also going to be giving you routines and how long you should spend on each thing in that routine throughout this course. So you should be spending at least 1 hour a day. It doesn't have to be all at the same time. You can do 30 minutes here, 30 minutes here. That's a good technique in the morning and at night, or whenever. As long as you have an hour total, that's fine. That's really, really important. If you can do more than that, it's going to be even better. As long as it's not more than 4, because then you're not really getting any benefit. And we're talking about sit down, focus, concentrated practice, not playing practice. Playing practice while you're doing the dishes, that is separate, that's additional. You should be doing that too. We need conscious attention to really feel what's going on. Now, your daily routine for this exercise, the dead tongue exercise, you're going to spend at least 10 minutes every day for at least 1 week. After that 1 week, if you have it, it will become a quick part of your warm-up before you work on new material. Now that we've talked about the dead tongue, let's move on to the second thing. We're going to do 4 directions with the throat. Now this is going to seem kind of weird. You probably want to make sure you're in a place where nobody can hear you because you're going to feel weird and feel stupid. That's okay. We're here to learn. You're going to start making sound. It doesn't matter if you have the dead tongue. It's preferred, but just, okay, whatever. You're going to start without any special thing in your throat. Okay, try to relax your throat first. All right, get it relaxed, and then just, okay. Then as you hold that, you're going to try to push your throat out as far as you can, just straight out. And close your eyes so that you can focus on feeling it. Okay, try to do that. And again, don't just focus on trying to do that. Actually feel what's going on. Pay close attention. Now we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go down instead. Okay, so you can close your eyes, repeat after me. Just trust the process. Please do this. Okay, I know it feels stupid. It doesn't seem like it's going to help. It is going to help. Trust me. I've tested these things. Next, we're going to go back. So you're going to try to close your throat. And that one can be kind of hard to do. Remember, we're focused on the throat on the inside, not necessarily this. You'll feel this move sometimes, but also the back of the tongue when you're trying to close the throat, the back of the tongue kind of wants to close back with it. It's okay, just focus on getting that throat back. The last direction here is going to be up, and all you're going to do for that, you're basically trying to like raise your pitch. So we're going to go trying to pay attention to the muscles involved and just feel what's happening. Okay, now if you can't do any of those, or if you do it and it's not much, there's just a little change, practice it. Okay, it's going to be useful. And we're going to do a second exercise here, which is going to involve the breath a little bit. This is the first basic breath training that we're going to add into this. More about that in the next phase, but for now, this is going to help you feel your throat and control your throat even more. You're going to take a big breath. You're going to hold your breath, so you're going to close that throat, and then you're going to slowly let out a little and close it again. Slowly let out a little and close it again. So for example, try to do that until you don't have any breath left. And you're focusing on feeling that open and close. You should feel your throat down here kind of coming in, coming in, coming in. Okay, so let's do that together, right? Big breath. Go ahead and close your eyes too. Now your routine for this, we have the 4 directions, and then we have that open close. You're going to want to spend probably about 5 minutes, not a whole lot of time, okay, for this first week. 5 minutes each day during your routine. You're going to spend a couple minutes doing the 4 directions. You're going to spend a couple minutes doing the open close. That's it. Not that hard. And now the very big main focus of this lesson, and this is the real key to developing a perfect native accent: tongue training itself. So we did the dead tongue. We did a bit with the throat, trying to get that more relaxed, trying to get some feeling in there. But we haven't gone back into the tongue and tried to do any directions or anything. We just relaxed it. So now we're going to go back to the 3 parts of the tongue, just like before, except you're going to try to move each part of the tongue in each direction by itself. Yes, by itself. So for example, the front up, the front down, the front forward, and the front back without this moving in any direction. Okay, it is possible. And this is the secret key. With the front part of the tongue, we're going to start there because that's the easiest one, really helps you get used to what we're doing here. But first you want to brace. You don't want to add tension. Okay, that's a little deceiving. A brace as a noun, think of a back brace. It's a sturdy piece of material that attaches to your back if you have back problems, back pain, to help keep your back straight in place. Okay, so it basically, don't think of it as tension, think of it as support. Okay, there's some support there. What you're going to do with your mouth, and this is so super important, you're going to need this, especially for the back and the middle. You're going to use your teeth, top teeth here, bottom teeth here, as a light brace for the sides of your tongue in the middle. And what you're going to do with that is, let's say this is your bottom teeth right here, okay? The sides of your tongue is going to just kind of lightly sit there. You don't want to push the tongue through the teeth. No. It's just going to lightly sit. Maybe it'll go about halfway through the width of the teeth, so it's just like right there. It's just going to kind of lightly sit there. Now your jaw, this is important too, your jaw needs to be a little more closed. Okay, not completely closed, closed enough that on the bottom of the side of your tongue, you feel the bottom teeth. On the top of the side of your tongue, you feel the top teeth lightly. You're not trying to hold it there with the teeth. It's very light. Okay, so see, I can still talk. Some things are a little cut. I can't do ah very well, but it's a very light brace. Okay, so feel that. You're going to be using that a lot. Once you have your brace, let's go to the front of the tongue. First step is very simple. All I want you to do is take the front part of your tongue, this whole thing. You're going to lift it up by itself. Okay, this doesn't come up, the jaw doesn't close. Okay, the jaw needs to stay where it is. You just lift it up. That's it. Now you can touch the top if you want. That's fine. It doesn't matter. Just focus on getting that lifted up. Okay. Now your checkpoint, you have a checkpoint here. If you lift this up and you feel the middle of your tongue sliding between the teeth, you're doing something wrong. If you lift this up and you feel the sides of your tongue in the middle getting really tense between those teeth, you're doing something wrong. Okay, a little bit of tension is okay, but we want to focus on lifting that front. That's not too hard for most people. Next, we're going to go down. So if this is the bottom of your mouth, your teeth, hair, under jaw here, okay, you're just gonna like slide against that. Don't try to lift it and do this. No, just let it be there and just slide it down. Okay. Again, make sure you're not sliding the sides of your tongue here. Okay. Now, if you can do that, fantastic. That's also not hard for most people. The next direction we're going to do, this is going to be maybe a little harder. We're going to try to take the front of the tongue and push it forward without the rest of the tongue moving. This is really important. In order to do that, you're basically going to try to stretch that front of the tongue, because this is all a muscle, but this is part of the muscle. You can stretch that muscle forward without using the rest of the tongue. Now, I don't recommend that you try to push it between your teeth, because then you're probably going to push the whole tongue forward. Just try to hit the inside right here of your top teeth. Okay, don't even like push it into it. Just extend it to there, right? Lightly touch it. Kind of like that. Again, pay very close attention that you don't feel the sides of your tongue in the middle sliding. Because if you are, that means that you're using the middle and maybe the back to push the tongue forward. You just want to stretch the front. If you can't do that without the sliding, you want to practice that. It seems, again, like something that is pointless. How is that going to help me? Please trust the process. I'm going to give you an example here. That's the TH sound. Now the rest of the tongue can technically move when we do the TH sound, but all you really have to do to make a good clear th or th, aside from a little bit with the shape, it's mostly just extending that front of the tongue forward. Th, th, th. Now there's one more direction, and this is probably the hardest one for the front of the tongue. You want to try to take the front of your tongue and push it back. Again, no movement here. Do not let the middle move. Do not let the back move. You're basically trying to, like an accordion, right? You're trying to sort of squish the front of the tongue back into the middle without the middle moving. Now, do not make your tongue do this. Okay, you're not trying to curl it back. Don't do this. You're not trying to curl it this way. If it kind of points up a little tiny bit, it's okay. That's fine, but it should mostly be that you're sort of pulling the front of the tongue back into the middle, okay, without this, just, my hand doesn't work. So go ahead and try that, and if you can't do that, again, make sure there's no sliding in the middle. That's your test, okay? A little bit of sliding around the corners here, that's okay. That's perfectly fine if you feel that, but if you feel this part of your tongue sliding on the teeth, you can't do that, okay? So if you can't pull it back, you want to practice that. Now you're going to practice these 4 directions, especially the ones you have most trouble with, probably forward and back. You're going to practice these 4 directions with the front of the tongue for at least a few days, preferably the whole week, but at least a few days for 5 minutes. Okay, now that we have that, we're going to apply the same basic idea to the back of the tongue. We're going to come to the middle last, number 1, because it's the hardest one to do, and number 2, because if you don't have the back under control, it becomes almost impossible to get the middle under control. So let's go to the back of the tongue. Try to get into that relaxed, dead tongue position, which I'm also going to call a neutral position, where there's not really any posture. It's just it's a zombie sound. Okay, so go into your dead and neutral zombie position as best as you can. If you don't have it perfect, it's okay. Just try to do it as best as you can. Relax the throat. Okay, we know how to do that. And you're going to focus on the back of your tongue. Now, when we were talking about the front, if you add voice, it doesn't make too much of a difference, and so we don't care. You kind of just got to feel it. But for the back, we're going to add voice, and this is very important because you want to be able to create a big enough difference in sound between the starting neutral point and the end point of whatever direction you're going. Because a lot of students, they will feel like they're moving in a particular direction, but when I listen to them, there's no change in sound, which means that they're not really controlling it. They don't really have much range or ability to manipulate it. So just because you feel it moving a little bit doesn't mean it's enough. You want to hear a significant difference in sound based on the direction you're going. So we go to the back. The first direction we're going to do is up. Okay, now I want you to try this first. I'm going to give you an example. You're going to try it, and then I'm going to give you some common traps that you want to avoid, because almost everybody falls into at least one of the traps with the different directions. You're going to take a breath. Okay, big breath. You're going to make sure everything feels as relaxed as possible. Zombie neutral sound. Okay. Then you're going to start making noise. You're going to hold that as you slowly come up. Okay, you're going to take the whole breath, one whole big breath, to go from neutral to closed. You're going to close it all the way. Okay, so you're basically going to end up in like the more or less position for the NG. Okay, so for example, Now you can also do it the other way, which is very useful as well, but we at least want to get that one direction slow. So go ahead and try that. Okay. Keep going if you're not done. It's okay. Now the traps here, number one, it's very common that instead of just going straight up, you'll go up and back a little bit. And you can tell if you're doing this because instead of you're going to hear because you're pushing more on that back flap that connects to your nose, the vellum. And you'll even hear it as you move up. Instead of you'll hear like starts to sound like you're choking yourself. The airway is getting blocked in here at the top. So avoid that. You want to go straight up. The second trap that you want to avoid is that when you bring the back of your tongue up like that, it's very natural that the middle of the tongue, or at least the back part of the middle, second half here, will want to come up with it to give it support, especially if you're trying to make sure it doesn't go backwards. And we don't want that. You might not feel it at first, it's okay, but you want to go for a nice, clean, straight up transition. If you start hearing a little bit of see, I'm activating my middle there instead of it's a little difference in sound. It's okay if you don't hear the difference, but try to feel, make sure you're not moving it back. You're not getting that middle involved. It's just kind of that very back of the tongue, just going straight up as much as possible by itself. And also, do not jump. Do not jump. What do I mean by that? If you do this, see how I started there? Maybe I started coming up a little bit and then, oh, don't do that. That means you have no control. You're probably getting the middle involved or something else. You don't know exactly what's happening and you don't have that control. So you need to go slow. Going slow is also a technique that will help you learn so much better and really get this stuff. So please do what I'm telling you. The next direction that we're going to talk about is down. So I'll give you an example of that. I'll let you try it, and then we'll talk about the traps again. So for example, take your breath, get relaxed. Go ahead and try that. Now, there are several points here that you want to be careful of. Number one, as you're doing this, try to imagine your tongue. And I see this in my head when I'm doing it. You want to focus on that part of the tongue here that's sort of that curve that starts going into the back before it goes in. So that curve there, that part by itself is what should be going straight down. Okay, not the whole tongue, or not the whole back of the tongue, just that one point. Try to push that one point straight down. Make sure you don't jump, right? You don't do, okay, no jumping. Another trap, just like going up and back, you don't want to do that. Going down and back, you don't want to do that either. You'll notice if you're doing that again when you feel that or hear that airway being closed off. Okay, we want that airway to still stay open. The other trap, again, is with the middle. So especially if you're trying to make sure you don't go back, the middle might try to come down with the back. And you don't want that either. Then you're going to get a sound like so make sure the middle isn't coming down with the back. Now, one more thing to be careful with for this direction is you might get that throat involved. Be very careful with that. You're not trying to bring the whole throat down. So if you have difficulty where you're trying to bring the back of your tongue down and your whole throat comes down, you don't have separate control and you want that separate control. If the throat comes down with it, it's going to sound something like you get this much deeper sound. It's going to be a deep sound just with the tongue, but it's going to be this even deeper sound, and you're going to kind of feel that throat try to move out of place. There's still going to be a little movement here. It's okay. Now, there's another way to approach this. I've had some students that have a lot of difficulty getting these basic 4 directions and making a significant enough difference in sound. And one thing that helps is to start with the end in mind. What that means is instead of starting in the neutral position, holding out your voice and slowly moving up, you still want to do that. Don't not do that. Definitely do that exercise. But another thing you can do to kind of get this better is start in the end position where the back of your tongue is already up and closed, or whatever direction it is. We're just going to use the up as an example. And you're trying to make sure that it's as straight up as possible when you close. And then you want to try to take whatever the front part that is touching, try to relax as much of it as you can. And then take the part behind this point and relax it as much as you can. So if this is the back of your tongue, right? My hands are the back of the tongue, and you're trying to push up onto the top of the mouth, you might be using a little bit of the, like pushing it back a little bit, you might be using a little of the middle. And so to really try to get more accurate and pinpoint this, you're going to bring the back up, but then try to relax this a little, try to relax this a little, so that you're still making a solid close, it's still solid contact up there, but you're trying to use almost like a point of the back of the tongue to make that contact. And doing it that way, just starting there and trying to relax in front and behind, can give you a better feeling of where that end position is supposed to go. And then you can go back to your neutral dead sound and slowly try to just raise that 1 point up and then adjust along the way. A quick bonus tip for all of these, as you start the transition, this is another reason why you want to go slow. So let's say you start and, okay, you're getting the back of that tongue down, 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 and then you start to feel or hear even, oh, I'm starting to get a little, the airway's getting a little closed. So you keep holding your voice, but you stop trying to push down for a second. You adjust, you make sure that you're not pushing back, get back in line, and then keep going. Okay, you make these little changes as you're going down. So you're paying attention, making sure you're not pushing the tongue back, make sure that you're not pushing the middle down with it. I have to do that. Now I can feel it. You probably can't feel it yet. You got to practice. That's okay. But as I go down, sometimes the middle wants to go with it, or it wants to go back a little. And I have to pay close attention and adjust as I'm going to make sure that it's just that back part coming down. These are the kind of skills that you need in order to get the proper posture and some of the sounds that you might have difficulty getting. Now let's try to move the back of the tongue forward without the rest of the tongue moving. So again, you have your brace. Always get your brace. Make sure that you don't feel the sides of the middle of your tongue pushing forward. Very important here. So instead of pushing the whole tongue forward with the back, you're just going to push that back into the middle, just like you did here, pushing the front back into the middle. You're going to push the back, front, and forward into the middle without this moving. For example, go ahead and try that. One thing to be careful of here is that the tongue isn't pushing up too much, because then you're going to block too much. You're going to be like, you don't want too much of that type of sound. It's more, so you already don't have a lot of space here anyway, and it's kind of hard. Just make sure that you're trying to go as forward as possible without it coming up or getting really tight. Just push it forward. But don't try to push it down either. Just try to go as straight forward as you can. Again, if you feel any movement of the middle of the tongue moving forward, you've got to separate that. Okay, it's very important. Then if we go backward, so all you're going to do here, again, you're not pulling the whole tongue back. You want to take this part of the muscle, the tongue muscle, and you're going to extend it backwards. Just like you took the front here and you stretched it forward, you're going to take the back and you're going to try to stretch it backwards all the way until it closes in the throat. Okay, don't go down and back. Don't go down and up. Just try to go straight back. So for example, make sure you have your brace. Try that. Don't let it slide back on the middle. Now your routine for this, you're going to spend 15 minutes every day for at least 1 week. That might seem like a lot, but this is a very, very important detail. And so important, in fact, that I'm going to recommend that you do the back for at least 2 or 3 days before you start the middle. We're going to talk about the middle today, so you have that information, but don't try to jump into the middle until you can start getting some basic control with the back and producing a difference in sound with the different directions. Now for the hardest part, and this is probably going to take you a little while, and that's okay. And this is where the brace becomes even more important because it's going to help give the middle of your tongue a little stability that it needs in order to do these directions. Yes, you can move the middle of the tongue by itself up, down, forward, and back. I know it sounds crazy, but this is what you need to do, especially to get certain sounds like right? These are commonly very difficult sounds for non-native learners, and you need to have control over the middle to be able to produce those sounds correctly. So let's start with the middle up. I'll give you an example, I'll let you try it, and then we'll talk about some of the traps to avoid. So first, upward. Now you don't really want to touch necessarily, just get it really close to the top. Go and try that. There are two big traps with this, two very, very big traps, and you want to pay very close attention. The first trap, as that middle comes up, the front wants to kind of squish up and back with it to provide some support. Don't do that. The second problem is that as you bring the middle up, that back wants to do the same thing, right? Because you're trying to take the middle of your tongue and sort of do this, but in order to get that middle up, the front and the back are like, okay, well, let's help push this up. And normally that's okay, but for this exercise, to get that fine control and awareness, make sure you're only using the middle. Now you won't really feel much sliding from the back or the front because the teeth mostly touch the middle part of the tongue, but you want to make sure that you don't feel the front or the back tensing up and pushing that middle as you slowly go up. Next, we have down. This one can also be a little tricky. And remember, we want a nice good range between that neutral dead sound all the way into a clearly different sound. So I'll give you an example. You can try it, and then we will go over the traps. Okay, go ahead and try that. We have a few things. The first is that the front of your tongue should stay in place. Okay, it can kind of feel like it wants to come up and off a little bit, but it should start just sort of resting on these teeth right here. And it shouldn't really move from that. If you feel it pulling down or sort of coming down with the middle, don't do that. Okay, it should stay mostly where it is. You also don't want the back to come down with the middle, so you're kind of trying to do this with your tongue, right? And you imagine like you're just really trying to push down that middle. The other problem that you might have, especially if you're trying to keep the back in place and not let it come down with the middle, is in order to compensate, the throat might try to get involved. And so you'll get something like, and you'll really hear that throat kind of push out. That's one reason we did the 4 directions with the throat. So, right, when you try to push it out, you can kind of feel what that's like and hear what that's like so that you don't fall into that trap. So the throat might kind of come out or down a little bit with that middle. You don't want to do that. You want to separate those two. So pay attention to that as well. Don't let the front move. Don't let the back move. Don't let the throat come down or out. Just that middle of the tongue going down. Okay, as far down as you can push it. Now, if this under here is too tight, you might have some trouble with pushing the middle down, pushing the back down. And you might want to just try to relax that a little bit, play with that, become more aware of that. It's a little side detail. The next thing is pushing the middle of the tongue forward. And this might seem very strange because how can you push the middle of your tongue forward without anything else moving? It's not going to move a whole lot, but you do need to move it enough to hear a difference in sound. So again, make sure you're not going up, you're not going down. It's just moving forward, and you want to focus on feeling that middle part, and it just kind of slides forward. Okay, you're not really going to slide here necessarily, but you should feel the muscle trying to push forward here without this moving, without that moving. So for example, so try that. And remember, the point here is to feel it. It's not about being able to reproduce the sound that I made. It's feeling it. The sound is just a guide to kind of see if you're adding anything that shouldn't be added. Now let's go back. And I'm going to give you an example. You can try it. Okay, now you'll probably notice that that started to kind of sound like the dark L, what I call the half L vowel, ul. And that's because that's actually the key. It's not the only thing you do, but that's the key way that you produce that. So again, you can see these difficult sounds that are very hard for most non-natives. It's because you can't control your tongue. Get the control of the tongue. One trap here, aside from making sure that you're not pulling the whole tongue back, just the middle, you might get too much extra tension on the back. It might sort of come up a bit, and you'll start closing off and get like, oh, okay. Keep that airway open. Because you're pushing the middle into the back and the back needs to stay there like a rock, right? You are going to feel some tension, and there might be a little tiny bit of tension that gets into the back when you pull that there, just so that it can stay in place and not be pushed back. And that's okay as long as it's not so tense and rising up to block anything off. You want most of the action to be from the middle. And in addition to just the basic sounds, because the center of gravity is in the middle of the tongue, there's going to be a lot of movement through that middle. And that's another reason why it's so super important, because as you're moving from sound to sound to sound, especially if you're going from like the back to the front, like the diphthong oi, or you're, even if it's just say you're going from ah to n, right? Back here, ah, bring that tongue up, n, on. You got to go through the middle. The middle is the center stability point for the whole mouth posture of American English. And it's always that center of gravity that's sort of affecting all the other sounds around it. So you have to get the middle. Your routine for the middle is going to be doing those 4 directions, especially whichever ones you have most difficulty with, for 15 minutes at least every day. And again, I very strongly recommend that you try to get the back for at least 2 or 3 days, or maybe even the whole week before you go to the middle. There's no harm in mixing them, but you're just not going to be able to get that full control if you don't have enough control in the back. So, and it might take you 2, 3, 4 weeks to really get all this stuff down. And you have to be able to do this before you move to phase 1, because in phase 1, we're going to be talking about setting the jaw and starting to build the center of gravity. And if you don't have these basic mechanics with the back and the middle, it's going to be a lot harder. Now, there is one final detail that does not apply to everybody that I want to mention here in phase 0. And this will mostly apply, it could apply to anybody. Sometimes random individuals have this problem, but it mostly applies to languages that are spoken very nasally, or to languages that have a lot of nasal sounds, like Portuguese, which has a lot of nasal vowels. So if you sound too nasally, right? If whenever you speak, you kind of sound like you're up here in your nose, how do you fix that? Okay, this is part of sort of a basic reset, and this might take you a little while to do, but you want to get that back flap. It's called the vellum, but there's this flap right here at the top of your throat that will open and close the passage to your nose. So if I do an M sound, the sound can't come through my mouth, it has to go through my nose, so that flap opens and it lets the sound go there. Now for American English, some people have a little bit of nasalness in their voice. It's okay, there's a little bit of an acceptable range, but for the most part, in American English, it's not really a nasally language. We have those are the official nasal sounds. We do have some unofficial nasal sounds that we'll talk about at a different time, but we want the sound to go through the mouth. If a little tiny bit goes through the nose, it's okay, maybe 1-2%, doesn't have to be perfect, but most of the sound goes through the mouth. So if I shift up here and I try to open that flap a little bit more, and I'm letting a lot more air escape through my nose as I'm speaking, less air is coming through my mouth and I sound nasally. So how do you get control over that back flap, the vellum? One technique, one exercise that I recommend is trying to say vowels. It doesn't matter if you can say them perfectly, just try to say some vowels like E, ah, whatever. And practice doing it where you try to say it once with that flap completely open, so the way you probably normally would if you speak a nasally language. So you'll say, if it's E, you say E, 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 E. You can hear that. E, 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 E. Okay? Then try to make it go through the mouth. E, E, E. Now if I do this, E. It's going mostly through the mouth and you close your nose, you're going to still hear it very, very well. Where if you're doing it through your nose and you close your nose, E, 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 E. Okay? That's how you can tell if it's open or closed. So you play with that. All right? If you're used to having it open and you're doing E, 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 try to close that flap, E, 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 redirect it through the mouth. Okay? Now, also, if you do that, if you hold your nose like this and you start speaking, and if you let it go through your nose, you'll sound like this, okay? But if you can manage to close that flap while holding your nose like that, so I'm trying to speak more through my mouth, right? Did you hear that? Try to speak through my mouth. I don't know if you can hear that, but if I hold this and I swallow and close, it creates a little vacuum that will hold that closed and can help redirect it. That can help you start feeling that. You don't normally want to do that. It's not going to be completely closed normally. It's just mostly closed. And you can start feeling it and manipulating it. So you just want to play with that. So, in summary, for your routine for this first week, or however long it takes you to get these basics well enough, remember these are minimums. You can do more if you want. You're going to spend at least 10 minutes every day practicing getting that dead tongue sound, the zombie sound. Then you're going to do the 4 directions of the throat, as well as that slow open and then close with the breath. You split that over 5 minutes. It's not 5 minutes for each part, it's 5 minutes total. Then you're going to do the front of the tongue for 5 minutes at least, and that will be the 4 directions. Again, total, not 5 minutes each, 5 minutes for all 4 together. Then you'll do 15 minutes for the back of the tongue, 4 directions, total, not each. You're going to do 15 minutes for the middle of the tongue, 4 directions. And again, preferably do the back for 2 or 3 days before you start the middle. And then if you need work controlling your nasal sound, then do the exercises for that back flap or the vellum for 10 minutes a day. Do not move on to phase 1 until you have some basic control over the 4 directions, over your throat. You can do that dead sound decently well. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. And you can start making a difference in sound between the 4 directions. If you can't make a difference in sound, do not move on. You have to have that first. If you have any questions, comments, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching another English Hacks lesson. And don't forget to check out some other great content. See you guys next time.